There is a powerful silent form of destruction that does not require violence, scandal, or confrontation. In fact, it is often the opposite. It is about control, stillness, and strategic withdrawal. This kind of destruction works by slowly unraveling your enemy without them ever realizing they are being undone. This is the essence of Machiavelli's approach to power. He understood that real strength does not come from confronting your enemy head-on, but from making them expose themselves. Destruction does not need to be loud or obvious. It is often the quietest forces that leave the deepest impact. Imagine a scenario where someone insults you, whether in public or in private. Most people would react immediately emotionally, either defending themselves or lashing back. They would try to prove their point, perhaps with words or a counterattack, because the instinct is to protect one's dignity. But in that moment, a response aligned with Machiavelli's thinking is entirely different. Instead of engaging, you choose stillness. You do not flinch, you do not respond. You simply remain calm and composed. The genius of this strategy lies in how it makes the other person look. When they expect a reaction, when they want you to show anger, frustration, or even panic, and you give them nothing, they start to look like the aggressor. The more they speak, the more they reveal their desperation. By remaining still, you are in control of the narrative, and they are left to flounder in their own attempts to provoke you. The silence itself becomes your weapon, forcing them to expose their instability and desperation. The key here is that your composure turns the entire situation on its head. Instead of the world seeing you as the victim, or the one who is being attacked, they see them as the one who is obsessed, unstable, and out of control. This is the first layer of this strategy: stillness as power. It is not about being passive or weak, but about knowing that the absence of a reaction holds more power than any response. Stillness confuses your opponent. They are used to seeing emotions run high, to seeing people react with anger or frustration. But when you remain calm, they start questioning their own actions. They expect a battle, but you refuse to engage. The more they try to provoke you, the more they expose their own desperation while you remain steady and unshaken. The true power in this strategy comes from the ability to maintain this composure over time. When someone insults you, they are hoping for a reaction. But when you do not give them that, they are left with nothing to work with. The more they speak, the more foolish they look. And in that silence, you regain control. This is where the second layer comes into play. Withdraw. Instead of reacting, you remove yourself from the equation entirely. You withdraw your attention, your support, and your energy. You stop engaging with them, and you stop including them in conversations or situations that matter. You do not need to announce your withdrawal. You do not need to make a grand statement. Your absence is enough. By removing your presence from the situation, you leave your opponent to spiral into their own confusion. They begin to chase you, trying harder and harder to provoke a reaction. But the more they do, the more irrelevant they become. This withdrawal does not require any words or grand gestures. It is the power of subtraction. You simply stop giving them what they need. They want validation, they want a reaction, they want attention. But by withdrawing, you deny them all of it. The more they try, the more they look desperate, and the more you rise above it. They are left with nothing to feed on. And you continue to move forward, building your own success, unaffected by their attempts to bring you down. This is the essence of this form of power. To make your opponent destroy themselves, you do not need to fight. You do not need to confront them. All you need to do is remain still, withdraw, and let them unravel themselves. By refusing to engage you, let them expose their own weaknesses. The more they try to drag you into their drama, the more they reveal their need for attention and validation. The louder they become, the more irrelevant they appear. The brilliance of this strategy is that it does not require you to do anything. You do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to argue or fight back. Instead, you allow them to make all the noise while you remain calm, composed, and focused on your own goals. The contrast between their actions and your silence speaks volumes. They become obsessed with you, with your presence, and the more they chase you, the more they reveal their desperation. In the end, you win without ever lifting a finger. Machiavelli understood the power of perception, how public opinion can be shaped by the absence of reaction. When you refuse to play into the narrative they are trying to create, you take away their power. They may try to manipulate the story, but as long as you stay composed and unaffected, the people around you will begin to see them for what they truly are: desperate, unstable, and irrelevant. This is not about proving anything or seeking revenge. It is about controlling the narrative and making your opponent's actions irrelevant. When someone targets you, they want to make you feel small, embarrassed, or defeated. But when you do not react, you flip the script entirely. They start to look like the ones with something to prove, while you move forward unbothered and unscathed. The final layer of this strategy is about making your enemy irrelevant. By choosing not to engage, not to react, and not to give them attention, you make their efforts to destroy you pointless. They may try to escalate. They may try harder to get a rise out of you. But every attempt they make only exposes their own insecurity. They end up looking like the ones who are obsessed, while you continue to rise unaffected by their noise. In the end, the power lies in your ability to remain calm and composed. You do not need to fight every battle, and you do not need to win every argument. By refusing to engage, you win on your own terms. Your stillness, your withdrawal, and your unwavering focus on your own path are what ultimately destroy your enemy. They may try to bring you down, but they cannot touch you when you no longer play by their rules. You have already won without ever having to strike back. This then is the essence of this powered destruction without attack. It is about shifting the dynamics, making your opponent expose themselves, and ultimately making them irrelevant. Power does not need to shout. It does not need to fight. True power is felt in the silence, in the absence of a reaction. It is in the stillness that you dominate, and in that stillness your enemy is left to destroy themselves. The brilliance of this strategy lies not just in silence, but in its ability to leverage the psychological weaknesses of those who attempt to destroy you. People who try to undermine you, whether through insults, rumors, or even passive-aggressive behavior, do not often realize the deep insecurities that drive them. Their attacks are not about you at all. They are about feeding their own desperate need for validation. They want you to respond, to engage, and to provide them with the attention they crave. But when you refuse to engage, you starve them of the very thing they need to survive the spotlight. This is where the second part comes into play, weaponizing their need for attention. It is not just about staying silent in the face of their attacks. It is about understanding that their need for a reaction from you is their greatest weakness. The more they try to provoke you, the more they reveal how hollow and insecure they are. They are not trying to harm you as much as they are trying to siphon off your energy, to make you a part of their story, to make you the reason for their existence. This is what fuels their efforts. But it also makes them fragile. When you stop responding, when you do not feed into their need for attention, you disrupt their entire sense of self. They are left with nothing to grab onto, nothing to use against you. In doing so, you turn the focus back onto them, but in a way that they cannot handle. They try to provoke you, but you give them nothing to work with. The longer this goes on, the more obvious it becomes that they are obsessed with you trying to control a narrative that simply does not exist anymore. This kind of strategy works on a deeper psychological level. Most people, when faced with an attack or an insult, feel the need to defend themselves. They react, and by doing so they validate the existence of the attack. But when you choose to ignore the provocation entirely, you make them question their own actions. The longer they chase after you, the more it becomes apparent that they are the ones desperately trying to stay relevant. People around them will begin to notice this desperation. And the more they rant, the more isolated they become. Here is the beauty of it. You do not need to tear them down with words or actions. They are doing it for you. All you need to do is withhold your energy, withhold your attention, and withhold any kind of reaction. Every time they speak about you and you do not respond, you make them look smaller. They start to sound obsessed, consumed by something that does not exist anymore. The narrative becomes clear. They are not trying to fight you. They are trying to force you to play their game. And when you do not, they are left in an ever-deepening hole. Think about this in the context of a workplace or a social setting. Someone undermines you in front of your peers, trying to make you look incompetent or out of place. The most common response would be to get defensive, to justify your actions, to prove that you are not what they say you are. But that is exactly what they want. They want you to react so they can turn it into a story. Instead, you remain calm, composed, and refuse to feed into their narrative. You simply move on. You do not acknowledge the attack. And over time, the people around you begin to notice something strange. The person who tried to undermine you becomes more and more desperate while you continue to excel and remain unshaken. This is where the true damage is done, not in the heat of the moment, but in the long-term shift of perception. The more they talk, the more they expose their own desperation, and the more irrelevant their position becomes. When they see that their insults or attacks are not having the desired effect, they begin to lose power. You have already taken that power away from them by simply not engaging. It is like watching someone try to shout over an empty room. The more they scream, the more they expose themselves as unstable while you remain calm, composed, and focused on your own success. In the end, this approach forces your opponent to destroy themselves, not because you fought back, but because they did everything they could to provoke you and failed. By refusing to react, by choosing stillness, you create a narrative of your own. You move forward with purpose while they are left behind, obsessing over a battle that never really existed. Their efforts to destroy you only reveal how irrelevant they have become. And in time, they begin to fade into obscurity. The next layer of this strategy is perhaps the most powerful, creating contrast through your own actions. Instead of trying to prove anything to anyone, you simply live your life in a way that contradicts everything your opponent has said about you. If they have called you incompetent, you deliver results with precision. If they have called you arrogant, you remain humble and generous. If they have tried to paint you as manipulative, you demonstrate transparency and integrity. You do not need to defend yourself because your actions speak louder than any words ever could. This is where the real brilliance of this philosophy lies. When someone attempts to destroy your reputation or undermine your position, they are not just attacking you. They are trying to reshape the narrative around you. They want to define who you are. But by choosing to live in a way that directly contradicts their portrayal of you, you turn the narrative on its head. The more they speak, the more they reveal how hollow their arguments are. And when you act in a way that is diametrically opposed to their claims, they lose the power to control the story. What happens next is subtle but powerful. As time passes, people start to notice the discrepancy between what is being said about you and the reality of who you are. They start to question the validity of the accusations and the truth of the narrative. The accuser's words start to lose weight while your actions, your consistency, and your integrity begin to speak for themselves. This shift does not happen overnight. But as the contrast builds, the truth becomes clearer. The person who tried to destroy you becomes the one who is exposed for their own lies, their own insecurities, and their own lack of integrity. This is the final part of the strategy. Winning not by attacking, but by simply becoming the person your enemy can never be. By living your life with purpose and consistency, by excelling in your own right, you make them irrelevant. They tried to tear you down, but in doing so, they expose their own weaknesses. You do not need to fight back. You do not need to engage. You simply need to continue moving forward. Their attacks, their slander, their insults, all of it fades into nothingness when your actions speak louder than their words. You have already won and they have already lost. The final piece, and perhaps the most devastating, is the creation of a persona that is so beyond reproach, so untouchable that your adversary can no longer even reach you. This is where you begin to realize that the true war was never about physical confrontation, words, or even reputation. It was about positioning yourself in such a way that your enemy's attacks no longer matter. You become so indispensable, so successful, so consistent in your actions that your opponent begins to wonder if they ever truly mattered at all. In these terms, this last strategy revolves around exposure through contrast. The most powerful weapon you have is the ability to make the contrast between your actions and their words so stark that it becomes impossible for others to believe their narrative. When someone undermines you by calling you incompetent or weak, you do the exact opposite. You demonstrate mastery, competence, and resilience. If they have painted you as arrogant or manipulative, you act with humility and transparency, never engaging in their drama. You elevate your own standard, and through this constant demonstration of strength and excellence, you slowly but surely expose the weaknesses in their attack. What happens here is subtle yet deeply impactful. As you continue to thrive, to excel, and to build, your enemy begins to realize they are not just failing to hurt you, they are failing to keep up. Their narrative is exposed for what it is, a fabrication, a distortion of reality. You have turned the table so thoroughly that their efforts to bring you down have only highlighted how far behind they are. They tried to attack your character, your achievements, but the more they did, the more your own actions left their accusations hollow. But the greatest blow comes when you stop acknowledging their existence altogether. When you are no longer invested in the narrative they are trying to create about you, when you do not respond to their attacks, or even acknowledge them as relevant, you create a void. The space once occupied by their attempts to destroy you is now silent, and in that silence you flourish. They are left trying to cling to a story that no longer matters to anyone, because everyone else has moved on. You have effectively erased their power over you. And now they are nothing more than a fading footnote in your story. This is the essence of this form of destruction, rendering your enemy irrelevant, not by attacking them, but by making their attempts so futile that they collapse under their own weight. You stop engaging with them, not because you are afraid of them or because you have lost, but because you realize they no longer have the power to affect you. They exist only in the shadow of your greatness, and by your refusal to acknowledge them, you expose just how insignificant they truly are. This type of destruction is psychological, not physical. It is a strategy of perception, one that allows you to maintain control even when your opponent thinks they have the upper hand. By remaining calm, composed, and focused on your goals, you show that you are above the petty games they play, and in doing so, you do not just win the battle, you win the war. Your opponent, consumed by their need to destroy you, ends up revealing their own weaknesses and insecurities while you continue to rise unaffected by their attempts to bring you down. But there is an even deeper layer for when your enemies are not just loudmouths or rumor-mongers, but those who work quietly behind the scenes to sabotage you. These enemies do not insult you directly. They try to erode your position subtly, undermining your reputation with whispers and half-truths. This kind of attack is far more insidious, and it is easy to fall into the trap of defending yourself, trying to correct the narrative or explaining your actions to everyone who might be listening. But this too plays into their hands. The more you explain yourself, the more you validate the rumor. Instead of defending yourself, the advice is to expose their behavior without ever saying a word. The most powerful response in these situations is to elevate yourself even further. You become more visible, not less. You perform with excellence, ensuring that those who are whispering behind your back are forced to witness your success. Speak clearly in meetings, make bold moves in public, and show integrity in everything you do. By doing so, you let the people around you see who you truly are, and they begin to compare the person you present with the story being told behind your back. In the end, the truth will reveal itself. The accuser's story does not match your reality, and in that dissonance, their credibility collapses. The beauty of this strategy is that you do not need to expose them directly. You do not need to point out their lies or confront them. Instead, you simply live your life in a way that proves their version of events to be false. By making your actions speak for themselves, you become the evidence that contradicts the narrative they have been trying to create. The more they whisper, the more irrelevant they become. Because your performance, your results, and your integrity stand in stark contrast to their claims. In time, the whispers fade. The people who once believed the rumors start to question them. They begin to wonder why they have been listening to someone who has no real evidence, who has nothing to offer but suspicion and hearsay. And in that moment, you have won. Your enemy who once tried to erode your reputation and destroy your position has become a non-issue. They have lost their credibility, their influence, and ultimately their relevance. The more they try to drag you into their web, the more they expose their own failures and insecurities. The final and perhaps most subtle step in this destruction is about the death of your enemy's relevance. Once you have made them irrelevant, they will either fade into obscurity or in some cases try to find new targets. But by that point, they are no longer a threat to you. You have reached a place of such influence, such indifference to their attacks that they can no longer reach you no matter how hard they try. And in the end, the people who once watched the conflict unfold now watch you rise unbothered and untouched by the drama that consumed them. The true power of this strategy lies not in direct confrontation or retaliation, but in the ability to outlast and outgrow your enemies. You do not need to tear them down to win. You simply need to continue moving forward to rise above the petty attempts to undermine you, and to live your life in a way that proves their efforts were never a threat to begin with. By focusing on your own success and maintaining control of the narrative, you leave your enemies behind, lost in their own attempts to chase after a victory they will never achieve. In the end, the greatest form of destruction is not a loud, dramatic event. It is the quiet collapse of an enemy who tried to take you down and failed. It is the moment when they realize that their attempts were futile, that they have been chasing a ghost while you have been building your empire. This is the power of this form of destruction. It is not about attacking. It is about becoming so untouchable that no one can even get close enough to harm you. And in doing so, you ensure that your enemy's attempts to destroy you are not only irrelevant, they are forgotten.